you've got this spike in the waveform, and that's the sound of her mouth opening. When you turn that up, you're actually turning up these things right here, and this is what it sounds like. Here's what we're actually deleting. Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. My name is Chris Green. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to get the cleanest vocal tracks possible without using any plugins whatsoever. Doesn't matter if you're using PreSonus Studio One, Pro Tools, Logic, any DAW will work for this trick. Best way you can support the channel is hit the subscribe button. I already assume you've already hit the subscribe button and the like button as well. Later on in this video, I've got a free gift for you. If you're into mixing or you're looking to get some practice under your belt, make sure you tune in to the rest of the video and I'll tell you where to go. So here in PreSonus Studio One, I have a session for In the Sweet By and By. My wife and I are recording a hymns album at the moment, which may be why you're not seeing a lot of video from me at the time. It's very time consuming, but I want to give you a glimpse as we're recording these different songs, different techniques and things that I've been using for quite a long time that might be beneficial to you. So the first thing you want to do, no matter what your session is, you want to make sure you've got some sort of arrangement or just logistically it looks very organized. So here, just to give you a breakdown, we have a lead vocal track from my wife. This is up here in light blue, and then she has 2 harmony vocals below it. Then there's just a basic acoustic guitar track. This entire album is going to be very minimal. Acoustic guitar, mandolin, box drum, that kind of stuff, maybe a little bit of piano in the future. But when it comes to vocals, here's what happens. My wife comes into this room. We have a Neumann TLM 103 over here. She sits at the desk and she knows how to use PreSonus Studio One. So she'll sit here and she'll record her vocal. And as you'll see in just a moment, she's done some punch ins, and those punch ins usually need to be edited a little bit, but you're probably used to seeing all of these blobs. Whatever DAW you're using, you want to expand what we're able to visually see. Most of this editing that we're doing today, you could actually do this editing without hearing anything whatsoever. So I'm going to expand my tracks on PreSonus Studio One. Down at the bottom, there's this little burger stack. We can expand things vertically. And then also, if I want to have a bigger view of the waveforms without actually affecting the gain or how loud the tracks are, at the bottom right, there's another burger stack, and you can expand the audio region. And as soon as I do, you can see we have a lot of noise, and these are the things that we want to remove. And you may be asking yourself, if you're somebody that mixes audio, you probably are thinking, hey, why not just use a gate? Gate plugins are fantastic. I have the FabFilter gate plugin. It has a look ahead feature, so it can examine the audio before it actually arrives at the gate. Very useful, but you may not have access to that plugin whatsoever. And I find that gates, for the most part, they do a good job. But if you have one of your settings wrong, it'll end up taking away some of that articulation, some of the details of the vocal. It'll kind of round off those transients. And this process really doesn't take that long whatsoever. So I'm going to basically expand everything that I'm viewing. And the first thing I want to talk about are the breaths. So what I'll do is I'll come in here to this vocal track. I'll right click it and I'll duplicate the track, and I'm going to rename this track Breaths or Breathes. And now the tools that I want you to become familiar with, if you're on PreSonus Studio One, you're going to hit the 3 key, and this is a slice tool. Most DAWs out there are going to have something very similar. What I want to do is find areas that I need to cut and mute. So I can assume everything that's happening during this intro up until this breath right here, I'm going to make a cut. Then I'm going to hit 1 on the keyboard. I'm going to select that little audio region. I'm going to hit Shift M. Basically what that does is it is muting all of that audio. You can also get this function if you're using some of the different tools or cursors. Again, depending on your DAW, it's kind of different things. But let's take a listen to this real quick. I'll have all the other tracks unmuted as well. Let's hear what we're listening to.
There's a land that is fairer than day. And
okay, from what I can tell, there's not any significant breaths happening. So you'll start to notice what breaths actually look like. They kind of look like feces, if I could say that, here on YouTube. I know that this right here is a form of a breath, but it's not a major breath. It's not a breath that's contributing to the song whatsoever. So I'm going to go right to where this major waveform is happening, the first word that my wife is singing. I'm making a slice, and I'm selecting the area before it, and I'm hitting Shift M. I'm just going to mute that. This area right here, I'm going to solo the vocal and I want to listen to where are the breaths happening.
The land that is fairer than day. And
Okay, I can hear there is a breath there, no matter how minimal it is. I want to save that breath. So I'm going to make a cut right before and right after the breath. I'm just going to click and drag this breath down onto the breaths track. So effectively what we're doing is we are going to mute everything other than the breaths. So now we have this vocal.
There's a land that is fairer than day, and by faith we can see it afar.
There's a more significant breath right there. So I'm going to go to the breath. I'm going to take my slice tool, just going to make a cut before and after. I'm going to drag it down. Now, how much of this space, the empty space, whatever you want to mute, is totally up to you. But those of you that have used a gate in the past, this is giving us a very gated sound.
For the Father waits over the way to...
Here's another more significant breath right there. We can click and drag this down. Now, the reason I'm separating these breaths into their own track is that I want to, in the future, I want to preserve the breaths. I don't want the breaths to be muted. I don't want them to be deleted, but I also want to process the breaths separate from the lead vocal. When you start using compression, when you start EQing a vocal, breaths can sometimes get in the way. So you start compensating for the breaths when you're doing EQ, when in fact it might just be easier to remove the breaths and process them separately. But you got to be really zoomed in to see these things. Once you spot them, as you can see right here before the chorus, I can see that this is a breath here. I can see another breath right here. You get pretty quick at it, and we're just going to click and drag these down. And again, your preference of how much space you want to mute. It seems like it may be a little jarring to have this much muting happening in between words, in between phrases, but in the context of the entire mix, it's going to make the vocal much cleaner. Let's take a listen here. Still haven't heard any of the breaths.
Place there in the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore.
Now, here's something I want to talk about that's unrelated to the breaths. My wife did a punch in, and I've mentioned this on my channel many times. When you're doing punch ins, always set the region that you're punching in greater than what you actually need it to be. Reason being, I've got a punch in right here that seems a little bit jarring. What she did was she shortened the word meet. So you can see if I peel back this audio, you can see that she originally held out the word meet. Here's the original recording.
We shall meet on that beautiful shore.
But she decided to change that up. So on the word meet, she did a punch in. Now this one works out pretty good. You can see there's a little bit of a crossfade, but this can be a problem in the future. Probably would have been better if she did the we shall meet on that beautiful shore. She just punched in the entire phrase. I could have scrunched it in, if that makes sense. So here we go.
We shall meet on that beautiful shore.
Now, after the word meet, this is a very somewhat insignificant space, but what we're doing as we're doing this like manual gating technique, we're getting rid of that room sound. It's going to make for clearer, cleaner audio, especially when it comes to adding reverb and things like that.
We shall meet on that beautiful shore. We shall sing.
Okay, here's another breath and etc. You can kind of get the point from here. I'll work my way through the rest of this audio. The thing you got to be careful of is I can see right here there is no major breath. I'm okay with just muting this entire area. If she didn't have to take a substantial breath when she was singing, then it's probably not worth saving because we want it to come across naturally. People breathe. If you get rid of all the breaths, it's going to sound like you punched in everything, or it's going to sound too robotic. We like the breathing because it makes it sound very natural, but we don't want it to be overdone. The other thing you got to watch out for, and again, I want you to expand these waveforms out pretty significant. Sometimes when she's holding out words that end in a T or a D or a P, any sort of consonant, you want to make sure that you don't cut off that T, P, B, whatever it might be. It's going to be there. You'll see a little blurb in the waveform. Make sure you keep those intact. Otherwise, you're going to start losing. You're going to have that gating effect that I was talking about earlier, where you're losing some of your articulation.
And our spirit shall sorrow no more.
Now, this section here, I'm going to turn this up. I'm going to clip gain this little section here because this is essentially what we're removing. And when you start using compression, compression is going to take your loud sections of your audio. It's going to compress them, make them quieter, but it's also going to bring up the quieter portions. So anytime you're compressing, it may not compress this much, but when you turn that makeup gain knob, when you turn that up, you're actually turning up these things right here. And this is what it sounds like. Here's what we're actually deleting. So one, you can hear the sound of air conditioning. You can hear maybe the sound of the laundry room. You can also hear the sound of mouth sounds. Okay. Those mouth sounds are not very musical. So for me, I do want to eliminate these manually as much as possible. Let's keep listening.
Not a sigh for the blessings of rest in the sweet by and by.
There's another one right there. You can just hear the sound of her mouth closing is not something particularly that we want to hear as a major part of the audio. And that one was pretty significantly loud. So make sure you scan through all of your audio, making these edits as we're going. I'm not going to speed this section up. I think I'm almost halfway through the song. Yeah, we're getting pretty far. So we'll just keep it rolling here. And next we're going to be talking about the harmonies and how we're going to lock them in. A little bit different than the lead vocal. Okay, this breath happens a much later. So I'm going to mute this section right here. And also, as you're doing this, as you get comfortable with it, you can also unmute the breath channel so that you make sure you have your breaths intact. Another thing that might be useful is as you are gathering breaths, it's completely acceptable if you need to copy and paste breaths. If there's a section where the breath just didn't come out clean or it sounds very unnatural, feel free to go to your breaths track, make a duplicate of that breath, and you can copy and paste this wherever you need it to go. It's just like cymbal swells or any sort of production element you might use. Yeah, so that's the section right here. As I zoom in, you can see this little blurb right here. This is not a breath. This is the V vowel. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Just because it's a very small, insignificant waveform doesn't mean it needs to be eliminated. If I went through here and I said, okay, that's probably like the sound of her mouth. If I mute it, we've lost the consonant. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're not chopping off consonants and losing articulation.
Tribute of praise for the glorious gift of his love.
You can hear that as I have this empty space of audio. Why am I muting this? Listen for the sounds. If you've got headphones on, you're definitely going to hear this. Here's the sound of automobiles. And you can hear the click track. So case in point, whenever you see just empty audio, it's completely acceptable to go through and just go ahead and delete those.
Oh, in the sweet by and by,
Here's a breath that has something interesting. So this breath I want to separate. But you can see right before she takes a breath, you've got this spike in the waveform, and that's the sound of her mouth opening. It's kind of an exaggerated version of it. Watch out for that. To me, that's not necessary for this particular breath. Don't think of breaths as being a bad thing. Breaths, again, are what's going to make your music sound even more natural. All right, let's take a listen right here to measure 87.
I'll meet on that beautiful.
Here's a slight breath. It's pretty insignificant, but I'm still going to drag it out. If you miss one or two breaths, it's not going to throw off your entire production, but it definitely goes to make.
We shall meet on that beautiful shore.
Nice. So we've done the entire vocal track. As you can see, we've got all of these breaths now. If I unmute the lead vocal, let's listen to it in context of the rest of the song.
There's a land that is fairer than day, and by faith we can see it afar. For the Father waits over the way to prepare us a dwelling place there in the sweet.
All right, so here's what we're talking about with harmonies. The way that I would treat them different from the lead vocal is I'm actually going to chop off the breaths. Why is that? Because when I process the breaths, for the most part, you're getting breaths at the same moment that you're getting a breath from the lead vocal. It's not as important that I hear all of the breaths of the background vocalist. If you think about this, if you have 10, 15, 20 background vocalists and they're all breathing, that sound is going to get amplified. And for the most part, we don't need it. So I can go through these, and rather than dragging the breaths out to a separate track, I'm simply just making a cut, which on PreSonus Studio One, I'm using the slice tool, hitting 3 on the keyboard, making my cut, then hitting 1 on the keyboard, selecting the audio region, hitting Shift M. And if you want to put a crossfade, I was going to mention this later, just hit X on your keyboard in PreSonus Studio One. You'll create a nice little crossfade. So crossfade is going to make those mutings have a little bit of a fade down and a fade back up when the audio returns. Doesn't take near as long as you think it would. Most of you are not going to be making some sort of YouTube tutorial as you're doing this, and you can move quite quickly through some of these smaller sections. So this is the second harmony and the last vocal harmony. Go ahead and get this stuff muted. Then we're going to talk about how we're processing these vocals and show you the benefit of why we went through making all of these cuts. If you're familiar here on YouTube, been enjoying a lot of videos. There's a channel out there, I believe it's just called Studio. You can see stuff from Charlie Puth, Ryan Tedder as well, talking about vocal production and meticulous editing. Sometimes they're going through and they're re-recording or punching in every syllable of a word. Now, I don't do that sort of pop music. Our stuff's a little bit more acoustic friendly, more natural sounding. But if you think that this is a complicated way, or this is an elaborate way to be editing vocals, I hope you understand that when it comes to major record labels, people who do this stuff for a living, this is stuff that maybe an assistant might be going through and working for them. If you're just running in and you're just throwing plugins all over your session, it doesn't mean that plugins aren't good and can't do this stuff for you, but it's good to learn the skill, just like with any other art form. So here we've got our lead vocal, our breaths track, and we have 2 background vocals as well. Let's take a listen to just the vocals isolated. This acoustic guitar track is one of those that could easily be deleted or replaced as we're recording the rest of the album. Right now, it's just a guide for me. When I recorded this, I also had a vocal of mine where I'm singing the hymn. That's not going to make it into the final production. It was just there to give my wife, so when she comes in here to sing, she's got a reference. She knows what verses to sing and so forth. So let's just listen to the vocals by themselves. Again, we haven't used any plugins whatsoever. We're just cutting out those breaths, separating them, and muting things.
There's a land that is fairer than day, and by faith we can see it afar. For the Father waits over the way to prepare us a dwelling place there in the sweet by and by. We shall meet on that beautiful shore.
I'm going to skip ahead to chorus 2. We got both background vocals.
In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore.
Okay, you might hear a little bit of distortion going on there. I do have a limiter for the sake of the recording. OBS doesn't like to see clipping whatsoever. But now we need to talk about these breaths. So what I would do with a breath track, if I just go into the stock plugins from PreSonus Studio One, I'll probably go into the Pro EQ. And the first thing I want to do with breaths is roll off all of our low end. So let's just pick one right here. Here is a breath. This may get a little bit annoying if you're not used to listening to this kind of thing. Okay, if I take the EQ away, those breaths sound really heavy. You can almost hear the sound of the room or the air conditioning. I'm going to set my high pass filter extremely high, right around 580 hertz or so. Let's take a listen. You can even roll it up higher if I want to. Now, there's a little bit of a click happening. You can deal with this however you want to. You may want to reach for a de-esser plugin, which might come in handy with that sort of thing. Or I can just try to isolate it with the same EQ. Sounds pretty normal to me if I unmute it with the rest of it. Now let's listen to the breaths and the lead vocal.
In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore, to a wonderful Father above. We shall offer.
Okay, so there you go. You got some fresh vocals here. We got some clean vocals with that vocal breath being separated. And now comes the fun part where you can go through and gain stage your vocals if you want to make sure that they're all at relatively equal volumes. From there, we want to do some mixing. I'll give you a hint when it comes to the vocal harmonies. I'm probably going to take these faders. Once they've been gain staged, turn them down to about -10. And then, of course, we're going to have compression, EQ, and stuff, which will be covered in another video. Like I said, I've got a free gift for you. If you've been watching up to this point, thank you so much for the support. Head over to heychrisgreen.com/free. What I've got for you is, it's called Mix Reps 1. There's a song that my wife and I recently covered, and I've got 6 audio tracks that include acoustic guitars, mandolin, piano, vocals, and harmonies. And you can feel free to take those audio tracks. Those are the raw audio tracks. Take those, mix them up as practice. You can even add in your own vocals if you want to, mute the original vocal. Those are available to you for free over at heychrisgreen.com/free. I want to thank you so much for watching this video. Stay tuned for more videos as we're breaking down the production behind this Hymns album. Very excited about the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.